Welcome to a special edition of the Silky Smooth Sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I'm Scott Parkin here in Berkeley, joined by
Bob Bazenko, as usual.
in Niles, Ohio.
Niles, Ohio.
And today, folks, is a special occasion that we've been excited about, that we've been making plans for weeks. And today is December 7th, which is not the anniversary of Pearl Harbor that we're going to be talking about, but instead it's Noam Chomsky's birthday, or as they refer to it in the film Captain Fantastic, Noam Chomsky Day. And so we are going to be rolling out a couple of videos today with some folks that we are friends with and that we've had on the show, and just kind of discussing Noam Chomsky. And so the first people you'll be hearing from are Scott and Bob.
Yeah, I think it's. It's fairly easy to understand why you would want to recognize Noam Chomsky. He's as influential intellectually as anybody in the last century. Really, we've all seen those data where he's, I forget what, like one of the 5 most quoted people in history, along with Plato and Aristotle and things like that. And he's made a mark in different fields, which is just unheard of. In linguistics, obviously, he's at the top of that, and cognitive thinking and politics. So there aren't a lot of people like that. Einstein comes to mind, but Einstein didn't have anywhere near the political involvement Noam Chomsky does. And I think it's important for a couple things too. Like, one, he's had such a global impact. I was talking to someone last night, and I said in 2018, when I was teaching in Venice, I mentioned something about him, and the class nodded approvingly. And I said, "Oh, you know who he is?" And they kind of laughed at me. These are 18, 19-year-old Italian students. And they said, "Of course we know who he is." And then I think there's a personal impact on people, like me and like some of the people we've talked to, in terms of what we've done, both intellectually and in terms of our activism. He's had a huge role. And then personally, one of the reasons I want to talk about him too is because lately, I think a lot of people on the left have been, and Noam certainly doesn't want anybody defending him. So this isn't a personal thing. I just think there's been this debate on the left about things like electoral politics and the way we should act politically and how one can be radical. And he's come under heat from a lot of people who frankly have never done much other than sit at a keyboard and attack other people. And I think it's important to understand where he's coming from on that regard too. And things like, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, and one of the highest profile attacks has been through the folks at Chapo Trap House, who have a very popular podcast, Virgil Texas, and then Brianna Greyjoy, who actually was a spokesperson for the Sanders campaign, have a podcast now, and they had Chomsky on and kind of got into to say it nicely, a heated debate with him, and then attacked him on Twitter. Noam's not even on Twitter, but attacked him on Twitter after, mostly just to kind of promote themselves.
Oh yeah. Going after him gives you, I guess it gives you, credibility or something like that. But yeah, you've seen a lot of that kind of, I don't know what you call it. So the dirtbag left. I don't even want to. Yeah, I think his thoughts on the election, which. Frankly, you and I came around and kind of said the same stuff, and I think the point he made that was so important. And I think it, most people aren't going to do the kind of stuff you do, which is like dedicate your life to these issues and actually put yourself on the front line and, do sit-ins and get arrested. So if you're not going to do that, then, you can take 20 or 30 minutes a day and go vote as a form of kind of harm mitigation. And he caught a lot of hell for that. And I thought that was just absurd. And the point that I think is important, and I think a lot of these younger people don't understand is, and we've talked about this, we're really excited because we got a David Barsamian, who has been his closest collaborator for decades now, to talk about him. Noam has been, in the streets of Belfast, during support rallies for the IRA, where the police have been out there. He's been in Palestine countless times, defending the rights of Palestinians, where, at any moment the IDF could have unleashed on him. He was in Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos during the wars, which were always danger zones. Remember when we had him in Houston? He was just before that, he was going to Turkey because his publisher was on trial for some, I don't know, sedition or something like that. And he wanted to be in the courtroom during this trial. His publisher was acquitted. And, at that point, anything was possible. I remember talking to the woman who handled his stuff at the time, Bev Stoll, and I said, well, he can't get arrested in Turkey because he's supposed to be in Houston. So he's not just he doesn't just sit down and pontificate. He's always been on the front lines. He was arrested in Washington, D.C. During the famous protest that Norman Mailer wrote about in Armies of the Night. He's been, I remember he once wrote that he and Howard had been in countless demonstrations and facing police batons together. So he's, these people now criticizing him, a lot of them, I don't think have ever stepped beyond social media activism. And so, you got to understand this guy's done a lot, and he's 92. His first essay ever published was about the Spanish Civil War. And he lived through World War II, and he lived through the Holocaust, and he lived through the Cold War and McCarthyism and COINTELPRO and Vietnam and civil rights. And, he understands the terrors of all those things. And so when he says, I don't agree that Trump is the greatest threat in the history of mankind, but, if he says Donald Trump is dangerous and we need to get rid of him, he does not. That's insane to deride a guy who's been through all that, done what he's done. Because he thinks that. I ended up agreeing with him, not that he's the worst, not that Trump is the most dangerous person ever, but that Trump had to go.
Yep, absolutely. And, it's an important reminder, which I actually see like sort of playing out in a couple of different like kind of political spheres, one in this sort of Jacobin socialist left where, and not all of them are super critical of Chomsky, but like the Chapo Trap House sort of critique that, why are you telling people to go support the Democrats? They're just as bad. Or in these like kind of more like holier than thou anarchist spaces where, any engagement with the electoral politics is like, not real politics, that sort of thing. And, this sort of critique of Noam Chomsky is like the sort of like, to me, it's almost like it's like a litmus test of how radical you are. If you can criticize Chomsky in this moment, then, you're more radical than now.
And, the irony is that Chomsky's identified as an anarchist for forever, right? I mean, he's done more to like let people know what anarchism is than all these folks collectively ever will. And he understands what it means. I mean, he's always he's always cited like Orwell's Homage to Catalonia as one of the most influential works he's ever read. He's also an absolutist on free expression, which is somewhat out of vogue, and I actually tend to agree with him. Years ago, there was a book on kind of a defense of the Khmer Rouge, and Chomsky wrote a foreword basically saying, I disagree with all of this, but I think he has the right to publish it. And since then, he's been attacked even by like people like Zizek, who I call him Sideshow Zizek because I think he's a clown, who attacked him all. He's a defender. He's an apologist for the Khmer Rouge. That wasn't the case at all. He's defended Assange and Snowden, where not just liberals, but people on the left, just run away from him. He's defended, people who have been, even the recent group of people who were arrested with the Venezuelan, like Max Blumenthal, whereas Jacobin never said a word in support of them, because they're caught up. I mean, Noam has no interest in any of these sectarian lefty things. He doesn't belong to any of those. And, he's an absolutist on those issues. He signed the Harper's letter recently, which, I wouldn't have signed because, although I believe in free expression, I think that, like New York Times editors who get fired for giving Tom Cotton space to advocate, violent attacks on protesters, that's not free expression to me. But that's who he is. And, he believes in these kinds of ideals that, we should all be able to talk and, and have this discussion about these. And I catch hell for this too. I mean, there is a left cancel culture. the reason I don't, focus on it much is because the right cancel culture is so much worse, going after people like Steven Salata and BDS advocates. And, some dean is not nearly the threat for doing some stupid stuff that like Bill Barr is. So I think, we need to figure out who the real enemies in that regard are. But there is a
There's a
cancel.
prioritization that needs to happen a little bit
Yeah.
more often.
And he's caught a lot of shit for that too, for like signing the Harper's letter. And I wasn't that impressed with the letter, but I'm not at all surprised to see his name on something like that. Should not surprise anybody. He's been that way for 70 some years, 80 years, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, he doesn't need our defense and would be embarrassed by it probably. He doesn't need no ego. But at the same time, I think politically we have to understand that, it's 2020 and this purity bullshit's got to stop. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll say that one of the things I get excited about with this show is how we're like, we basically don't like adhere to any like super rigid ideology, and instead like there's in a way this show is a little bit more principle based, and we're anti-fascist and anti-racist and believe in direct action and organizing. We don't believe that has to happen in a certain way with certain, if only the right people are in the room or the right things are being said. And so I that's what I appreciate about Green and Red, and that's why I appreciate that we're celebrating Noam Chomsky today.
Yeah, and I'm a little older than you, and you work with a lot of people who are probably much younger than you are. I grew up in a generation where, Chomsky was widely reviled because not that many people are on the left, but among people who were in that new left generation, I remember one of the first historical conferences I ever attended. I was just a newly minted PhD. I think you were with me. It was in Athens, and somebody made some comment about Chomsky. I forget what the hell it was, and I just
it was around 9/11, 9/11.
Yeah, and he said Chomsky applauded 9/11 or something stupid like that, and that's insane. That's ridiculous. And so there, he's been a great straw man, a bogeyman for people on the right for a long time, and even on people on the left. He's like I said, that like the anecdote about being in Venice, like he's far better known globally than he is here in the U.S. because they tend to be political systems there, which are, I think a lot broader. And he's always and I talked to somebody last night who does a lot of work on Indonesia and Timor, who told me some great stuff. And he's always been there, during the 80s. I remember, in Central America, he went to Managua, the Managua lectures, which, I'd advocate that anybody read. I first, and I knew who he was. I heard the name, but I was in a used bookstore in Columbus, Ohio, and I found a copy of American Power and the New Mandarins for like a couple bucks. And he has an essay in there, which I think maybe even today stands as kind of the best known. It's called The Responsibility of Intellectuals. And since I was, a professor, it still has a huge impact on me, where he talks about, how, intellectuals serve the state, and we're seeing that right now with like, Neera Tanden and all these really horrific neoliberals who've been, Rita Teixeira, all these kind of intellectual defenders of this horrific status quo, Barack Obama, right? And Noam pointed out that, as people who study these things in detail and understand them well, we have a responsibility to stand up for people who are, voiceless or dispossessed. And he's always done that, and he's always been on the front lines. He's never been afraid to travel, like I said, to Central America, to Belfast, to Palestine, to wherever, Timor, wherever. I mean, the people in Timor, think he had a major role to play in their independence movement. He was active in the anti-apartheid movement in the 80s and 90s. So I think when people start to attack him because he whatever, said that you should vote for Biden, or whether he signed a petition, I mean, that's just it's just silly. And I mean, as an activist, I think, there was a generation where he was very well known and respected too. I don't know, like now, but what younger people think of him, or if they even know who he is. But
Yeah, I mean, there's like so much to say, and how much of an inspiration he's been to me over the years. Um, I yeah, I don't know if I have much else to say.
well, no, and I mean, he's had a huge impact. I mean, the thing too is, and several people have pointed this out. He's not in any way impressed by credentials. Barsamian said, he could have a high school kid from the school newspaper in his office for an interview with like a Nobel Prize winner waiting outside. He's, I told him, we were chatting once, emailing once about Sicily. And he told me a funny story, and, said that he felt much more comfortable around Sicilian peasants than he did, the faculty at most universities. And I can certainly agree with that. I definitely understand that. Yeah. So he's just has no ego. He's down there, but he's 92. He's done so much. He's known so much. He's published about 92 books, I think. The interviews he's done with Barsamian and others are incredible. Back long ago when I had a radio show, I had 2 or 3 interviews with him, which were really, really inspiring. I brag. I think I had the first post 911 interview with him back in the old days. I had him on September 12th, 2001. So he's done so much. He's just always been generous with his time and intellectually and everything else. So, whether you like him or not, or whether you don't, you have to engage him. And I think the fact is kind of like great people like me, like Marx, the fact that so many people spend so much time attacking him and deriding him, I think indicates just how important his work has been over the years. And so we're going to have more people on today. We're going to have a few people we know reminiscing about him, just talking about the influence he's had and what he's done, just to kind of put it out there and let people know that this is somebody who you really should engage with and try to figure out where he's really coming from, not these caricatures that you're getting from a lot of self-described anarchists and keyboard activists and people like that.
Self-described socialists. It's actually a lot of socialists left too.
Yeah.
So folks, you've been listening to Bob and Scott talking about Noam Chomsky on Noam Chomsky's birthday. This is Green and Red. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Give us a rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and consider going to Patreon, to patreon.com/greenredpodcast, becoming a patron, or making a donation at greenandredpodcast.org, like a one-time donation. And enjoy the videos that we are rolling out to you today. Thanks.